Welcome to Rock and Roll High School, your choice for in-depth and personal conversations with the most legendary artists in the history of contemporary music. Come with us as we explore the albums and songs that have become the soundtrack of our lives. Here's your host, Pete Ganbarg.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rock and Roll High School. Our guest this week is one of the most successful and influential songwriters in the history of popular music. For more than 5 decades, Desmond Child has written songs that have sold hundreds of millions of records, while helping define the careers of some of the biggest artists in the world. His songs include classics like I Was Made for Lovin' You, You Give Love a Bad Name, Livin On A Prayer, Bad Medicine, Dude Looks Like a Lady, Angel, Poison, I Hate Myself for Loving You, and countless others. Desmond's extraordinary body of work earned him induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and his commitment to the songwriting community extends well beyond his own catalog. He's also the co-founder of the Latin Songwriters Hall of Fame, helping recognize and celebrate the creators behind some of the most important music in the Spanish-speaking world. But Desmond is much more than a hit songwriter. He's also been a producer, artist, mentor, author, and one of the great collaborators in modern music, with an extraordinary ability to help artists discover the very best versions of themselves. His latest project, Desmond Child Rocks the Parthenon, the live concert album, released on July 24, 2026, captures an unforgettable all-star concert recorded beneath the Acropolis in Athens, celebrating his remarkable songwriting catalog with performances by artists including Alice Cooper, the late great Bonnie Tyler, Rita Wilson, the Rasmus, and many more. In this conversation, Desmond reflects on his remarkable journey, from his musical upbringing to becoming one of the world's most sought-after songwriters, and on the creative philosophy that has kept him at the top of the music business for more than 50 years. Here's my conversation with the legendary Desmond Child. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rock and Roll High School, a very special episode of Rock and Roll High School, our 100th episode. And who better to join us for our milestone 100th episode, our good friend from his home studio, Nashville, Tennessee, the great Desmond Child. Hi, Des.
Hi.
So good to see you. We've been trying to do this for a long time. You and I have known each other for, I don't want to say how many years because that'll make us sound older than we are, but we've known each other a long time. We proudly serve as board members together on the Songwriters Hall of Fame. You also founded, with Rudy Perez, the Latin Songwriters Hall of Fame. So not only is this our 100th episode, but it's our final episode of our 5th season, and poetically, our first episode of this season, season 5, was your friend and collaborator, Alice Cooper. So how's that for bookends?
Oh, I love that.
You wrote a great memoir called Livin On A Prayer, Big Songs, Big Life, that was released in October of 2023. And what's fascinating to me, not only is it a great book and highly recommended to anyone who's listening to this, you will learn a lot, not just about music, but about life and about lessons and about Desmond. But like much of your best work, it's a collaboration, but not with another songwriter. It's a collaboration with the great writer David Ritz. And for me, David Ritz is probably the best writer of musical biography that there is. You know, famously Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles. Is there a correlation between a great artist looking for a hit and calling you, and you looking to write a great book and reaching out to David?
I was reading the New York Times, and there was a review of his book called Respect, of which they made a movie with Jennifer Hudson. And when I read this review, I just said, this is the guy. So I was able to get a meeting with him, and he opens the door, and he looks like the Dalai Lama. You know, he's like wearing this shmata and but his arms are covered in Moreau tattoos and shaved bald and all this. And then he ushers me into his little guest house in the back where he does all of his work. And I sat down and he asked me two questions and I was already in tears. So I said, this is the guy that can get to the real me.
And how long was the process with you and David writing the book?
7 years.
Wow.
And we would meet in many different locales. We met, of course, in Los Angeles, in Nashville, New York, Athens, Greece, Philagandros. We were all over the place. And I think that was helpful in a way because it made it all fresh again when we would get together.
When you finished the process and this work was a book, how did you feel? Did you feel like nailed it, David was the right guy, I'm proud of this?
Absolutely. But the thing is that when you start delving into the past and you get real with yourself, you realize how much fiction you've created that you believe. And so looking back was painful. And it was almost therapeutic,
Yes,
in a way.
Well, you get
so it's not like I wrote the book and now I can leave it behind me.
Right.
No, now it's a burden I carry.
Right. It shows vulnerability. There's a lot of things that people, if they were in your position, may not have wanted to share. For instance, something that surprised me, you spent several years of your life in a cult and you gave a lot of money to this cult. And the way that you got out of it, and this is not you as a young man, this is you as a successful songwriter, just seemingly looking for family, and you found it in this cult, but eventually you got out of the cult, and the way that you did, as you write so poetically in the book, was on a tour of the Soviet Union, and a tour guide said to you, "We are trapped," and you realized that you were trapped, but unlike her, you could do something about it, and you went home and you left the cult.
That's right. It was very, very stunning. I was on a bus ride from St. Petersburg to Estonia. The tour guide was like on the mic, and sitting behind me was Michael Bolton, Diane Warren. We had Holly Knight, we had Brenda Russell, we had, Mike Stoller. There were like 48 top songwriters. And this lady was so brave, she had the bus pull over. And then she told us, that, she was, of course, Estonian. She told us how difficult it was to live without freedom. And so she said, please help us. Please do something. And this was, 1988. And I don't think Glasnost had kicked in yet. And, when we were in Moscow, it really felt like we were being observed. And it was like the evil empire was fitting.
Right.
We'd be in our room and we weren't allowed to have any outside people meet us in our rooms or join us, and we couldn't go to their homes. It was all very forbidden. And I remember being in the room with some of these, Cyndi Lauper and this one and that one, and we had a bottle of wine, and we said, gosh, there's not a wine bottle opener. And we were looking around, and all of a sudden there was a knock on the door, and Helga gave us the wine opener.
Right.
So that means
big
that
brother,
they were listening.
Big brother is listening. Exactly.
Yeah, our big sister.
This is all part. This is all part of a cultural exchange that you write about in the book, where you and some great American songwriters go and collaborate with some great Russian songwriters, and some of those songwriters and artists have become lifelong friends of yours. But like I said, there's a lot of very personal, vulnerable things in this book. In reading the book, the figure who looms largest for me is your mom, Elena Casals, also called Mimi. And your relationship with her is complex, but so much of who you are comes from her. And I want to read how you describe her in the beginning of the book. She's an extraordinary poet, songwriter, seductress, and con artist. She was a narcissist of spectacular proportions who was also altruistic. She wanted to both save the world and conquer it. And then you describe her as a cross between Blanche Dubois and Angelica Houston in The Grifters. So as a child growing up, this must have been, you talk about writing this book as becoming very therapeutic. This is not normal. Your mom is this larger than life character, and it's not necessarily all good.
Well, I had to be careful that she didn't overtake the book, because then it would have been her autobiography instead of mine. I mean, she didn't understand boundaries at all. So when I was a child, I was almost like her husband. It was like there was no separation between me and her in her mind. That was very confusing. And it took me a long time to establish who I was myself. Right. And I felt it was important to say so in the book, because my journey has always been a question of, who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing? What's ahead? What should I spend my time with? Whatever's left of it. I mean, I'm always questioning, always trying to define myself. And it's a hard thing to do, because as you grow up, you become different people.
Right.
I became a parent.
Right.
Now I'm somebody my kids don't call. And
like any other dad. Yeah. There you go.
Just requests.
I've met your sons. They're awesome. Your sons, Roman and Nero. Nero famously named after Laura Nero, who we're going to talk about. But what's funny is there's some really scary moments for a child in this book, where you talk about one point you're a teenager and your mom stops your loud keyboard playing and screams at you, "No matter what you do, you'll never be as great as me." Because she always thought that the success should be hers.
Well, it really was kind of funny, but it brings out that point. When I was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, I acknowledged her in my acceptance speech from the stage, and she stood up and everybody applauded. But then she milked it. She turned around and looked at the entire room. And all of a sudden, she got a tremendous applause. So it was like she was getting the award, right, not I.
It was her moment, as, maybe even more so than your moment. But despite all that, you have kind of immortalized her, because there was a sculpture of a seated woman holding a guitar with her head turned towards the side, your mother being the model for the sculptress, a woman named Lee Burnham. The sculpture is called La Musa, and that sculpture is now the symbol of the Latin Songwriters Hall of Fame in honor of your mom. So she does live on.
My mother tried so hard to make it as a songwriter. She was always in the process of making a demo. She was often absent because she was working on trying to sell her songs, going to nightclubs with her tapes and sheet music to give to artists. And so she never really made it, even though she had cuts. And she had one popular song in Latin America. It was one of those things where I felt like she needed to have an award that was to an up-and-coming female songwriter that we would give this award to as a way of encouraging them. And so there's the Elena Casals, La Musa Elena Casals Award, and it's always a fantastic young up-and-coming female Latin star.
Wow.
In a way, that's how she's being immortalized.
What a great tribute. What a great tribute.
Yeah. I mean, in the Songwriters Hall of Fame, we have the Hal David Starlight Award.
Right.
And I've seen people accept that award like Taylor Swift
Sure.
and,
This
John Mayer and
this
all of
year
these
this
people.
year the great singer Ray.
Oh my God, Ray.
So good.
I can't get over Ray. And so we've modeled ourselves in the spirit and the high level of the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Right.
We have many of the same rules, and you have to have been actively in the music business 20 years
Right.
before you can be inducted.
Amazing that you and Rudy took this on your back and you did it, and obviously amazing
And we're still doing it.
that your mom is such a key part of this for anyone who's inducted.
Yes, our next La Musa Awards is October, I think it's 14th.
It'll be here before you know it, I'm sure.
I enjoy it because I get to interact with so many different people,
Yeah.
and especially in Latin music, which has so many genres,
Right.
and coming from so many countries. The Songwriters Hall of Fame is usually more,
Anglo.
the United States,
Yeah.
England,
England.
Australia.
Yeah.
But, we have, 21 countries
Right.
that we're dealing with.
It's more
And
global.
they're all very different. And it's hard to bring them all together.
Right. And you guys do a great job of it. One other thing about your mom before we get on to your artist career and then your songwriting career. Your mom did not tell you who your father was. You were growing up with a man who you thought was your father. Your biological father did not reveal himself to you, even though you knew who he was because he would come around from time to time. And there's a great picture in the book of your mother, your biological father, and the man you thought was your father when you were around 1 year old. The three of them are posing for a picture together.
I know. My biological father's brother was, the paparazzi on the ground, always taking pictures of everything that was going on. Proof that they came around, proof that, I was wanted. So
your mother's husband was named John Barrett. Your birth name is actually John Charles Barrett, but your biological father is a Hungarian businessman who met your mom for trysts in Ecuador named Joe Murphy. And
no, not in Ecuador, in Venezuela.
In Venezuela, my mistake. Sorry. She
Yeah.
lived in Ecuador and then in Venezuela. But,
Right.
we haven't even started talking about your songwriting. We could just go on and on about this because, this is a movie or a show or a Broadway musical, which you're working on with our friend David Sigerson. How is that going?
Oh, it's going great. One of the chapters in my book is about my mother's beautiful younger sisters. As it so happens, I mean, they were gorgeous. They were drop dead, fantastic looking, and had a lot of charm, and they were ambitious. And they lived in a little town in Cuba called Pinar del Rio. And Beba, when she was about 19 years old, began a relationship with the dictator Fulgencio Batista. And so in order to legitimize her, he brought the whole family to Havana and gave everybody jobs and positions and all of this stuff. And so the other younger sister, she met a revolutionary. And after the revolution, he had a position. It was a terrible position, writing death warrants for people to be executed. I mean, I heard that in the beginnings of the revolution, over 100,000 people were executed that were part of the government before. And so then he went a little bit crazy and was abusing her, and she left him, and she began a relationship with Fidel Castro.
Wait a second. Your mother had two sisters. She had more than two sisters, but two of her sisters. One is Batista's mistress. The other one is Castro's mistress. You can't make this up.
I know. And so David Sigerson, my partner, we began 23 years ago when he said, that story has to be a musical. So we made it into a musical, and we are now fully going forward. The musical is now titled Havana.
Wow, because it was Cuba Libre at one point. It was Beba's
Yeah.
Mambo at one point,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, but now our lead producer, Rob Aarons, he also produced Chess and Just in Time and
Great.
Xanadu, other things. He said, you know what? What about Havana? And we just all loved it so
Right.
much because it was all our other titles were hard for gringos to say.
Right.
But
Right.
what's ironic is Havana is never said in the musical.
Right.
It's always the Spanish version, which is La Habana.
Right. And
So,
there's a song from the musical that's actually already been recorded and released by one of your legendary icons who you ended up working with, Barbra Streisand, as a
yes,
collaboration with Josh Groban.
yes. Usually she's doing Broadway songs that are already famous from musicals that are out and successful. But she fell in love with the song and she didn't care. And she recorded it. It was on her latest album.
Amazing.
So yeah, I had written another song for her, solely written, called Lady Liberty in 2016, which it's one of the most proudest creations I've done because I feel like I really captured not only her style, but her message that she wanted to put out there.
Burn that flame of freedom just a little brighter, please, for all the world to see and still believe. Oh, lady, liberty.
And that's a song that's probably been brewing inside of you for your whole life, because in the book you talk about seeing Funny Girl in an Ecuadorian movie theater, and the scene where she sings Don't Rain on My Parade from a tugboat passes the Statue of Liberty.
That's right. And that's why I always thought of her as Lady Liberty herself, because she's always been for causes to help America stay free.
Right.
Through Jay Landers, her executive music supervisor, he brought me in and he played me several songs of hers, one of which I recorded recently
Oh, that's so funny.
with the cast of The Gilded Age.
Wow, you're
A
kidding.
trio. Yeah, the song's called I Remember, written by Stephen Sondheim. And Barbara had asked him, it came from a television musical called Evening Primrose. And it was like a mannequin that came to life inside Bergdorf Goodman. And she lived her life in secret. And it was great. So the song is called I Remember. And Barbara was making a Christmas album and asked Stephen Sondheim if he would turn the song into a Christmas song. So he writes this incredibly beautiful intro to the song. I've always loved the song, and it was a big influence on Lady Liberty. You know, there's some things about I Remember that, were sort of brought into Lady Liberty,
Right.
the way the strings go and all that. I recently made an album with the cast of The Gilded Age, and I decided to offer I Remember as a trio with Audra McDonald, Kelly O'Hara, and Donna Murphy.
Wow.
And they sing it as taking turns at this very beautiful song. And it's really like breathtaking.
Amazing.
It's a kind of going back and forth with Barbara.
Right.
in a way.
That's awesome. I mean,
Because
she
doing the
plays.
song is kind of a love letter to her.
Yeah, and she plays such a outsized role in your creative journey from that early age of watching Funny Girl. But there's a great chapter in the book where not only do you tell that story, but you really get into, as an A&R guy, I really appreciated the fact of showing Jay's role, really sitting you down and explaining what Barbara needed, and that got you the information that you needed to go and write the song. And Lady Liberty, as you mentioned, is 100%er, which is unusual for you or for pretty much any songwriter right now.
Well, it was like a bolt of lightning. He played me, I Remember, and I just went to the piano and started right away singing Lady Liberty. And he loved the title, and I just kept going.
Yeah, great.
And so right in Jay's living room, that's where the song came to life.
Two of the artists who inspire you early on, Streisand is one, the other one is Laura Nyro. You meet Jerry Wexler, who's, one of the all-time great record executives, head of Atlantic Records with Ahmet Ertegun. You meet and befriend his daughter, Lisa. Lisa is the one who introduces you to the music of Laura Nyro, which really changes your life. Is it true that Laura Nyro's father tuned your pianos?
Yes. When I got to New York, I lived in a little apartment with my then girlfriend, Maria Vidal. I had brought up a little Wurlitzer spinet, and it was shoved into a little corner of the room where we also slept and everything. I had learned that Laura Nyro's father was tuning people's pianos, and I wanted to see if I could get inside information on Laura, which of course he was very happy to, give us and tell us stories. And one of the most interesting things is she would go along with him to piano tunings. And so, you would hear, a tonic to a fourth to a fifth open like that without the middle chord. And if you hear her music, that's the way she played piano. She really had an influence on me. The biggest song that I feel she influenced was Livin On A Prayer.
Wow.
Because the verses were spooky, like her music, like a song called Been on a Train, and Never Gonna Be the Same. I started playing these spooky chords. The song just came to life. Gina in the song, that was Maria's waitress name.
Right.
Because she was working at a place called Once Upon a Stove, where the waiters and waitresses would stop and they'd sing a song.
Right.
But they never had their real names. They always had these fake names, and her fake name was Gina Velvet.
Right.
We had already parted ways by the time I met Bon Jovi, but those were some of the most beautiful memories of my life, living in that tiny apartment.
Right, and that song inspired by Laura Nyro's music, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
and I got to meet Laura Nyro.
I know.
And,
you write about it so beautifully in the book, and she tragically died so young, but you guys became close towards the end of her life, which is beautiful. So in high school, you meet another woman named Deborah Wallstein, known as Debbie Wall. You start making music together, and you decide you're going to rename each other. You name her Virgil Knight, and based on a character in the Beatles song Obla Di Obla Da, she names you Desmond Child, which you like because it sounds like Elton John. Together, the group becomes known as Night Child.
I have a story. A couple of years ago, Bon Jovi was being honored at the Person of the Year award show. Where everyone does tributes and all of this.
And Music Cares?
Yeah, and Music Cares. Right. I saw John a few tables away, and I went over, and on his right was Bruce Springsteen. On his left was Paul McCartney. And I asked John, would it be okay if you introduced me to Paul? And, oh, yeah, whatever. So I spoke to Paul. It was so cute. I said, by the way, I'm named after a character in Obla Di Obla Da. And he's looked at me and I said, because in the final line of the song, it says, Desmond stays at home and paints his pretty face. And at night, she is a singer in the band. Originally, I thought she was Molly, Desmond and Molly, right. Whatever. The she is he. He looked at me and he said, I always wondered if the people out there understood that Desmond was gay. And I said, yes. And that's why I named myself after him. And so I said, oh, can we take a picture? And I think he has a no pictures policy, because otherwise he'd never move through the world. But he did, and he took my phone and he did the selfie of him and me. Wow. And so it's like I have a picture of me with Paul McCartney.
Man, where your name comes from. He named you. There you go.
He did.
So after high school, you meet Maria Vidal, as you mentioned, and she would later follow you to NYU in New York, along with Diana, your third friend. And you, Maria, Diana, and a woman named Miriam form a group in New York called Desmond Child and Rouge. And Desmond Child and Rouge, as you can see, Desmond can see, but everybody listening cannot see. I've been, raiding the record stores and listening to the two albums that Desmond Child and Rouge made for Capitol Records. Desmond Child and Rouge, was really big for a minute. Even though it wasn't a smash hit, you had a song that charted, Our Love Is Insane. And I didn't even realize in December of 1979, Desmond Child and Rouge were the musical guest on Saturday Night Live.
I know it was a very wild year because I was turning, I think, 24. Maria and I had already been together 4 years. I realized that deep down, I was really more gay than I was bi. I was like on the borderline of gay. It really broke the group up,
Well, there's a song, the first song on the second album, Runners in the Night, is a song called The Truth Comes Out, which is your literal coming out in lyric.
When the truth came out, no hiding now. You turned my life all about. The day the truth came out.
So, at that point, I've heard you say that people were not interested in your life. Your destiny was not to be in the front of the stage so much as it was to bring truth to the other artists that you would end up working with and writing all these hits.
Well, by default, because I really wanted to be the biggest star in the world myself, because that's what my mother was always saying about herself.
Right.
She says, I'm going to have a hit and I'm going to buy a mansion on Miami Beach and we're going to live there and da-da-da-da-da. Well, guess what? I went to Miami Beach and I bought 4 mansions and gave one to her, all in the same 2-block radius.
She probably thought it was because of her that you had the mansion, like she always predicted.
She would never call me Desmond until I had, she'd say, Yanni, 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 Johnny, right? When I had my big hit, Livin La Vida Loca, then she started bragging about me at the beauty parlor. And so all of a sudden she was Desmond Child's mother. And she'd go, Desmond. You started calling me Desmond. I'd already been Desmond for like 30 years.
That's awesome. Well, thanks to Ricky Martin, there's a great vignette in the book where you leave the room and you come back when you're recording and producing a Ricky Martin record and your mom is pitching one of her songs to him.
Yes, and it was a kind of beautiful ode to Puerto Rico called Diosa del Mar, goddess of the sea. And I walk in and he's got tears going down his face and the song's going. And it's like, oh my God, it was very I Love Lucy.
Put me in the show, Ricky, right? So one of your musical mentors is Bob Crewe. Bob Crewe, the great songwriter who wrote all the Four Seasons hits, wrote Lady Marmalade, one of the greatest of all time. You say that you went to songwriting college, Brill Building style, with Bob Crewe. For 2 years, you guys wrote 5 days a week together.
Yes. After Desmond Child and Rouge broke up, I was lost because I didn't really realize that, even though the group was called Desmond Child and Rouge, I was writing for a concept. I wasn't being, except, like that song, The Truth Comes Out, like most songwriters, you think that they're writing about their lives, when you hear their songs, Joni Mitchell and all of these people, that it's very personal. And I had nothing to say. I just couldn't pull it together. My good friend Elliot Hubbard, who was one of the owners of Reno Sweeney, fantastic legendary club on 13th Street in New York City, in the West Village, he introduced me to Bob Crew. His first question to me is, "What sign are you?" And I said, "Scorpio." And his eyes lit up because he would only work with Scorpios, only.
Wow.
Bob Gaudio, Kenny Nolan, and I met Charlie Fox, and he told me he was mentored by Bob Crew. And I said, "What sign are you?" He said, "Scorpio."
So if you're not a Scorpio, you're out of luck.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny.
And so he took me under his wing, and it was very disciplined.
Well, you've said that Bob Crew forever changed your concept of songwriting. He talked to you about the importance of titles, the importance of the hook, and something that you've taken with you to a majority of the hit songs that you've written, something that I've heard you call the tension of opposites. You want to mention that?
Yes. The tension of opposites is a way to form a title that engages the listener. So you'll have "You Give Love a Bad Name." Heaven's on fire. How could heaven be on fire? Fire is for hell, not heaven. How can we be lovers if we can't be friends?
Right.
I hate myself for loving you.
Right.
There are so many of my titles, I come in with that. And it's so easy to write songs like that.
Right.
Because you have a built-in brand.
Right.
And many of the songs have turned into brands.
Yeah, and amazing hits. I mean, it's probably a good time to talk about some of Desmond's accolades just in terms of how many songs. And how many songs would you say that you've written in your career so far?
I would say about 4,000.
Right. And I've read that 4,000 songs, and then you keep breaking it down to how many have been hits and how many of those hits have been number ones. It's astounding. You know, more than 80 Billboard Top 40 singles across 6 decades with sales exceeding 500 million records, billions of streams, billions of views. These are songs everybody knows. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't know Desmond's name, you know his songs. I Was Made for Lovin' You, Kiss, Poison, Alice Cooper, Bad Medicine, Bon Jovi, Dude Looks Like a Lady, Aerosmith, You Give Love a Bad Name, Bon Jovi as well, Livin La Vida Loca, Livin On A Prayer. It goes on and on and on. And to think that you kind of put in your 10,000 hours in those 2 years training with Bob Crew, and Bob Crew taught you, as you've said, to write so that people can sing along.
Absolutely. One of his strict rules was Broadway style, which is you rhyme clean rhymes. So June rhymes with moon, but enough doesn't rhyme with love. One's an F sound and one's a V sound. How many songs have you heard love and enough rhyme together?
Many.
Many. And so he said, especially true on choruses, because if you have a stadium full of people singing, they have to imagine what the rhyme is in order for them to, be able to sing along and memorize the hook. So you'll hear a chorus the first time. Let's say you never heard that song before. By the second time the chorus goes along, you're kind of singing along. By the time it modulates and does the last chorus, you're like, fist in the air on your seat. And so that's why clean rhymes are so powerful. With Bob, I didn't understand this, and he was such a stickler. He made me cry one time, actually. We were supposedly writing for me for my solo career. He had a song and he wanted to put in Lady. And I said, I can't sing Lady. I'm gay. Because, he had a hit with Lady Marmalade. So He loved the word lady.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't sing it. And he would berated me. And then the teardrops were falling on the keys, And all of a sudden he backed off. But understanding that clean rhyme thing, sometimes we'd write a song, and if it wasn't clean, sometimes you have to rewrite the line before
Right.
in order to make it all make sense
Right.
for the rhyme that you're going to put in.
Right.
And really, the English language is kind of limited. I mean, there are dictionaries, but a lot of it's just, technical words.
Right.
But the common language that we all speak is very limited. People aren't going to want to hear complicated words in songs
Right.
anyway.
It makes it challenging for you as a songwriter. You and Bob Crewe
Yes.
would write 38 songs together.
Yes.
What happened to those songs?
Well, he got me a deal, and it was kind of pathetic in a way because he was like 51 and I was 26 now. God, I thought he was old. And he had sort of fallen out of fashion. And he had become a visual artist. And so, like, he said, okay, well, he had an apartment on the East Side with beautiful paintings and all this. And then he rented a studio apartment on 56th Street and Broadway.
Yeah.
There was a little restaurant where we'd meet every day at noon. It's called Coco Van. And they would have a special for like $4.65.
You always split checks, right?
Everything was Dutch with him because he had been so lavish, went and got himself sober. And that was part of his regimen, is that he couldn't pay for anybody else. Meanwhile, I didn't have that much money, but, I always paid my own way. It wasn't that expensive anyway. It was a 3-course meal and everything. And then by 1, I was sitting at the piano across the street in a room that had no pictures, no posters, no nothing, just a black piano and a Berber carpet. Remember Berber carpets?
Sure.
And there was a coffee machine that he would be making black coffee and putting sweet and low in it, not even Cremora, nothing. He sat in a chair, a stool, where he could put his feet up, and it had arms, and it was leather, and it looked really comfortable. I never tried sitting in it. And I was on the bench, for hours upon hours upon hours.
With pencils and notepads, right?
Oh, he was sharpening he had a pencil sharpener in the kitchen. And blank pads. But ironically, when he passed away, his brother, Dan, gave me that stool of his.
Wow. You still have it?
So it's in my New York apartment.
Amazing.
Yes.
But what an education for a songwriter.
Yes, I mean, he was so generous with his time.
If not for Bob Crewe, there'd probably not be the Desmond Child that we all know as a songwriter.
No.
Amazing.
I had other mentors as well. My acting coach, Sandra Seacat, because, I wanted to be a movie star as well.
Right.
And so
Why not?
she came from the actor's studio and left the actor's studio because she wasn't going along with Lee Strasberg's method of berating an actor when they were doing a scene until they were like in tears. And then all of a sudden he would say, okay, do the scene.
Right.
And so all of a sudden they had tears.
Right.
And she didn't believe in that. So she had a whole other system. And so in her little apartment on 43rd Street, 13S, on 10th Avenue, in the room, we'd all be sitting on the floor. Wherever we could sit was Mickey Rourke, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jessica Lange, Cicely Tyson, Francis Fisher, Christopher Reeves. I mean,
amazing.
Everybody in that room. And then there was another kid like me. His name was Lawrence Bender.
Oh, my God.
And he ended up being the producer of
Pulp Fiction.
And he was a dancer.
That's crazy.
He was a dancer in college. And somehow he made it into that room. And so we were sort of like the guys that would go out for, Starbucks and all that. We were just like assistants. She was very, very, very influential,
Yeah, I mean, one thing you've written about Sandra Seacat in the book is that, the lessons that you learned from her, no soul, no lasting art, no genuine emotion, no true expression. And I have to stop for 1 second because you mentioned Mickey Rourke. Tell everybody about what Mickey Rourke did for you in middle school.
Well, we were in 8th grade And actually, he was in ninth and I was in eighth. And I was being bullied by a kid named Howard Kasdan. Never forget that name. He would, pass me in the hallway and he said, I'm gonna kick your effing ass after school. I'm gonna kill you, all this kind of stuff. And Mickey was more like the Fonz, right? Leather jacket, came to school on a motorcycle and all this kind of stuff. He passed him when he was doing that to me, and he grabbed him and put him up against the wall. And he said, you better stop that or I'm going to kill you. Don't ever speak to him again. And he was like my hero.
Yeah, he's your protector.
And my protector. Many years later, he was in Sandra's class.
Amazing.
With me. We stayed friends.
Such a small world, right?
Right?
Well,
it was karma.
Amazing. Let's fast forward because we're going to run out of time at some point and talk about all these great hits that you have written. Talk about Paul Stanley, who's another very, very important figure in your life in this story. Paul Stanley actually writes the foreword in your book, and there is a quote when he's asked to describe you. He said, if Doc Pomus, the great Brill Building songwriter, if Doc Pomus and Laura Nyro had a baby delivered at the Brill Building, his name would be Desmond Child. How brilliant is that? So talk yes. about Paul coming to see Desmond Child and Rouge at Trax, the club on West 72nd Street, and what happens after that.
Well, we were playing Trax. I think we had already been signed to Capitol Records, so we were still gigging and trying out material and all of this. And that Trax was literally underground. So you went from the street downstairs, and it was very, I actually loved it. It was very sleek, very empty. It was very cool with cool lighting and all this. And there was a curtain, and then there was a stage, and the dressing room was behind the curtain. And so all of a sudden we were getting dressed, a few minutes from the start of the show. This guy pulls the curtain open. He says, hey, by the way, I'm Paul Stanley of Kiss. And we just looked at him because we had never seen what his real face looked like.
It's always with makeup on, right?
or a handkerchief or something like that, right? It was like the biggest kept secret. And he said, I just want to let you guys know that George Harrison is sitting at the front table.
This is before your gig?
Yes.
Oh my God.
And so I peeked and I saw those big white teeth. Oh my God. And then I felt like I had like a narcolepsy attack. It was like, I just wanted to fall asleep. I just wanted to go to sleep. Can I just curl up and go to sleep? I was so nervous. We just jumped out there. We killed it. And then Paul came back after, said, hey, we should write a song together. And I said, oh, great. We're still writing songs for our first album. Write a song with me. And so we wrote a song called The Fight that was on our first album. And it was also co-written. It was a start that I had with David Landau, John Landau's brother, who was our guitarist. Then after we recorded the song, I stayed in touch with Paul and I said, hey, it's your turn now. It's time for me to write a song with you for your band. And, he was like, you don't know Gene Simmons. That would be like an impossibility. I said, come on, let's just try something. It doesn't have to be for you, whatever. And so I went to SIR and Kiss was rehearsing there. At 1 o'clock was their lunch break. And so they came tumbling out. Like I was like standing there and they were like, each one had spikes on their shoulders, like, kind of pushing and going past me. And I went into the room and there was a piano. There was Paul and there was a piano with a canvas cover, and he helped me open the piano and he sat next to me and we wrote, I Was Made for Lovin' You. And Gene always hated the song.
Right. Was that your first outside co-write with an artist?
I think it was,
yeah,
yes.
I mean, not a bad song. That is now, not only is it Kiss's most popular song streaming-wise. It's over 1.5 billion streams on Spotify. It's got close to triple the streams of any other Kiss song. How about that?
Pity. Gene still goes on. He doesn't like the song. But it's like, oh, well, but you like your name on the check, right?
Exactly. And then there's a whole thing about Gene that we won't get into where Gene is bad-mouthing you in the press. But after you guys, you and Paul write another hit for Kiss called Heaven's on Fire. You say to Paul, can you tell Gene to stop shit-talking me? And he leaves a message on your answering machine saying, hi, it's Gene, sorry, click. And that was good enough for you, right?
Yeah, that was good enough.
And then Paul Stanley is talking to Bon Jovi, and Bon Jovi says, I love that song, Heaven's on Fire. And Paul Stanley says, well, here's Desmond Child's phone number. You guys should write with him.
Yes, and that's how it went. And my manager, Winston Simone, got in touch with their A&R guy, and so they kind of put us together. So, but I did get the call from John. I didn't know it then, but they were on a break, and they thought, well, why don't we do what Desmond does and write songs for other artists so we can bring money in for the band? And, you know, we don't need him because we write our own songs.
Right.
And so I came in with the title, You Give Love a Bad Name. And I also had a song that I solely wrote for Bonnie Tyler called If You Were a Woman and I Was a Man.
If you were a woman and I was a man, would it be so hard to understand that a heart's a heart and we do what we can? If you were a woman and I was a man, if you were a woman and I was a man.
For a lot of political reasons or whatever, Bonnie Tyler did not get promoted on the album I made called Hide Your Heart. I knew that that music was a hit song. So I said, hey guys, this song was released a year ago, whatever. Let's try rewriting it as You Give Love a Bad Name.
Shot through the heart and you're to blame. You give love a bad name. I play my part and you play your game. You give love a bad name. And you give love a bad name.
That's how that song came about. It was kind of an interpolation, but because I was a sole writer, I didn't have to
Right.
go to co-writers and get permission and all of that.
That's interesting.
4 years ago, it interpolated again. If You're a Woman and I Was a Man became Kings and Queens.
If all of the kings had their queens on the throne, we would pop champagne and raise a toast to all of the queens who are fighting alone. Baby, you're not dancing on your own. Can't live without.
By Ava Max, which is now
with
another
Ava Max.
song that's over 1 billion streams on Spotify. Thank you very much. The gift that keeps giving.
If you take those chords and you write a song with those chords, you'll have a hit, guaranteed.
There you go. Young songwriters out there, there's a cheat code for you. You guys, Richie, and John actually wrote You Give Love a Bad Name. John had a song called Shot Through the Heart from an earlier album. And so it was like this whole combination of your title, your melody from the Bonnie Tyler song, and John's Shot Through the Heart. And that all kind of puts together in this soup that becomes You Give Love a Bad Name.
I know. And that was the first song we wrote. And it was magical. I mean,
And you wrote it downstairs in Richie's parents' laundry room. How
yeah,
about that?
dingy. It looked like Silence of the Lambs down there. And there was a little Formica table and a little keyboard teetering, the buzz of space heaters and Richie's amp. And girls outside, you could see their ankles going around the house. Like fans were already like pursuing them. That's how it all started. We really, in a way, changed the course of pop music. But I have to give credit to Bruce Fairburn, who
Great producer.
was their producer in
Yeah.
Vancouver, who was also doing albums with Aerosmith. So he would kind of go back and forth. I then started getting songs with Aerosmith, and I don't think either band was happy that I was two-timing,
Right.
going back and forth. But I think that also kept me in the circle.
Sure. Well, back to Bon Jovi for a second. How long after You Give Love a Bad Name did you guys write Livin On A Prayer?
Oh, it must have been the following month.
Wow.
In New York City, I borrowed an apartment that had a big old upright grand piano, looked like it was from the 1930s or something, all out of tune, a lot of keys sticking. And I remember Richie sat behind me, and John, had a chair, but he spent most of the time pacing and kind of going over lyrics and all that. I mean, it was like one of those magical things again. The chemistry between the three of us had a feeling. And so I'll never forget when we were writing, Gotta Hold On to What You Got, right? And they thought that was the chorus. I said, no, that's the B section. Now let's write the chorus. And
Amazing.
so, we started, I started off with that, oh, because my hit with Desmond Child and Rouge, oh, our love is insane. So, we're halfway there. And then Richie went, oh.
Which really makes the song, right?
Because that was sort of the harmony. And he always sang the top harmony. And I said, no, let's make that the melody.
Wow. You talk about writing for stadiums. I mean, all of a sudden you're turning that, or Richie going, oh, oh, up. He's turning it into a duet with the audience at the stadium. How brilliant is that?
Well, I've been tremendously lucky in my life, coming from where I did, the poverty of the projects, and my mom, just, all of that, to the beautiful life I have now with my husband, Curtis, and our sons, Roman and Nero, who are now 24 years old. And they decided to become music business or entertainment business attorneys. So they're going to law school next year.
That's so funny. I mean,
What?
Yeah, I wanted to just stop you right there because there's a documentary film. Roman and Nero, your twins, were born by surrogate, and you tell this beautiful story in the book. But there's a documentary film about their journey that's called Two, TWO2, the story of Roman and Nero. And the reason that it's called Two is because their godfather wrote a poem that he read at their, I don't know if it was christening or six-month-old birthday party, but their godfather is John Bon Jovi. So there you go.
And in one of my son's rooms is the framed
speech
card. And that said Ritz-Carlton. And he had been staying at the Ritz-Carlton, and he wrote this speech, and with little, squiggles and crossed out and this and that. And so it was a stunning moment, and the things he said were like so beautiful.
What a special relationship between you, John, and Richie.
Yes, we wrote a song about three guys that met in high school or whatever, and called Blood on Blood. And in my mind, it was about the three of us.
And not only Livin On A Prayer and You Give Love a Bad Name, but also Bad Medicine, that was a #1, and Born to Be My Baby, that was a top 5. Quickly, before we wrap up, so many other songs. Let's talk about Aerosmith, because there's that famous story of you meeting Joe and Stephen for the first time, and Stephen has a song called Cruisin' for the Ladies, and what do you say to him?
I walked in, not even a hello, and Stephen called me over to this corner where Joe was recording this backwards guitar that was going, I had like a boogie woogie kind of a na 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 na. Then Stephen started singing "Cruising for the Ladies" and na na. And they said, well, then they stopped and said, what do you think of that? I said, that's really bad.
That's the first time you're meeting them.
Yeah,
You said
I
that's
said,
really bad.
I don't know why I was so bold that I said this. I don't think Van Halen would put that on the B side of their worst record.
Ouch. Ouch.
And then Stephen kind of was shy-ish in a way and said, well, I used to, when I first started singing that hook, I was singing "Dude Looks Like a Lady." And I said, that's a hit title. And Joe kind of crossed his arms looking at me sideways. I mean, that's how he poses for pictures anyway. You know? And he said, well, we don't know what that means. And I said, don't worry about it. I know what that means. And I asked Stephen, how did you come by "Dude Looks Like a Lady"? He said, well, we had all gone to our meeting, you know, all the roadies, everybody had meetings. The wives had meetings, the management had meetings, all this kind of sober meetings, whatever. And they all went to a bar to have their sodas. All of a sudden, it was an empty bar, and there was this long row of bar stools. And at the very end was this vision of loveliness, teased up platinum hair, you know, ivory skin, all curvy with black nails. They were going, oh my God, who's going to go? They were like drawing straws. Who's going to say hello? Who's going to go up to her? And suddenly she turns around and it's Vince Neil of Motley Crue. So that's when Stephen said, oh, that dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady. And that's how he came up with it.
You know, and that was such a smash for them. And that led to this great run of you and Joe and Stephen. Angel, which you talk about, the great ballad Angel that you guys wrote. You talk about wanting to capture Mick Jagger's lips singing Angie.
Right.
And so you got Steven Tyler singing Angel. So
like
smart.
over and over again. You know, that was just like, oh, I got to have him like say Angel.
Crazy, What It Takes, Fine, Fine. Some amazing songs with Aerosmith. You had the big hit with Joan Jett, I Hate Myself for Loving You. There's the tension of opposites. And what Joan Jett has said is that even though it was a 50-50 collaboration, you made her sound more like Joan Jett than anything she could have done herself. And I think that's a secret to your success. How do you write with all these artists, Paul Stanley, Bon Jovi, Steven Tyler, Alice Cooper, Joan Jett, Cher, Ricky Martin, and make them sound more like them than like you? How do you do that?
Well, it's all about story because that's what Bob Crew taught me. So it's being an empath, you know, having empathy. And I was just so much better at feeling another person's soul than my own. It's like I look inwards, I see nothing. But I look out and I see this person that needs to be saying something. They're crying out to say something. And not only just to have a hit, that would be great, but I could never think of it that way. It's like riding a bike, and if you think about it, you fall down. It was all about story. It's like, tell me about yourself. Tell me your story. And everything they said became lyrics.
Right.
And so that's how it was. And some things I remember in those days, like writing, and things just felt like they came from the other side of the universe or something. It was like goosebumps. I haven't felt that in a long time, writing a song. But in those days, because everything was new and everything was open, and we could do whatever we wanted to do, and we didn't have to worry about a genre to fit in a market or a programming style that, oh, I remember when that started, we were working with Biff Naked, a Canadian artist, and we had this cool song, and we had this kind of like Doors organ on it. And they said, oh no, Canadian rock radio will not play anything that even has one keyboard on it. It has to be all guitar. And it was like, and we wrote this great song called I Love Myself Today. I love myself today. It's really a great song.
I love myself today, not like yesterday. I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm gonna be okay. I love myself today, not like yesterday. Take another look at me now, 'cause it's your last look forever.
That's when the restrictions started, because they had so many channels. You could tune in on a market and say, well, these people will listen to just country music. These people will just listen to Mexican music. And it goes on and on and on by the hundreds, by the thousands. So people don't get educated into appreciating other kinds of music.
Right.
When I was living in the projects, there was this big metal wheel that would turn around and we'd push off. And there were, black kids, Latin kids, white trash kids like me, all playing together. And somebody would have a little transistor radio. And there was, at that time in Miami in the 60s, there weren't that many stations. I don't think there were like 2 or 3 that played popular music. But you'd hear Wilson Pickett, and it'd go into the Beatles, and it'd go into Dionne Warwick, and then it'd go into something else from that time.
It was all just great music. Who needs labels? It's great music.
Yes, it wasn't like, oh, you're not cool if you listen to that.
Right.
That didn't start till later. It was glorious for me because it educated me on every style. And I can write in any style. It's just the story that needs to be told, and it can be in any style.
In any style. And speaking of that, the last song before we wrap up that I want to talk about is the global #1 all-time smash, Livin La Vida Loca with Ricky Martin. So you and Draco Rosa are creating, the Cup of Life, La Copa de la Vida, which was the #1 World Cup anthem in 22 countries. And then you write the all-time Livin La Vida Loca. Is it true that the title was inspired by a chicken restaurant?
Well, yeah, because I was like driving in LA and I looked up and I saw El Pollo Loco because I was looking for words that were in Spanish that everyone understood. And so actually, if you read the lyrics of that song, it only has 3 words in Spanish. La Vida Loca. Livin is English, right? Nowhere in the rest of the song, even her skin's the color of mocha. That's an Arab name, right? Arabic, right? And so I get a call from Donnie Einer, and he said, listen.
Donnie was the president of Columbia Records.
Right. He said, very bossy guy. And he said, listen, can you write the song in English now? I said, it is in English. He says, no one's going to be able to say that. I said, I'm telling you, they will. And so he was, kind of hung up on me. Then the full page ad in Billboard came out, and it said, Livin La Vida Loca. And then underneath it, in much bigger font, it said, Livin the Crazy Life.
Outside, inside out.
Well, nobody remembers the song as Livin the Crazy Life. Everybody remembers the song Livin La Vida Loca. And as a global number one, not only was it, a quote unquote Spanglish, even though it had 3 Spanish words, number one, but it was also, that people may not realize, the first fully digital recorded song in Pro Tools to reach number one on the Billboard Hot 100. And you've been quoted as saying, "I'm the Alexander Graham Bell of Pro Tools."
I don't know if I said that. Maybe
somebody said that,
maybe
and then
I
I've
did.
heard you say
maybe I was on an ego trip or whatever.
Then I've heard you say that Pro Tools was so early in its technology, and the technology was so unstable that it was jokingly called Slow Tools instead of Pro Tools.
Well, we'd have to call the company maybe 10 to 15 times a day to get them to alter the app for some, because it would just jam up and just wouldn't work. And so it took us a couple of years because I had moved to Miami Beach with Curtis, my husband. We converted a 2-car garage into what was called the Gentleman's Club. And we actually made it to the cover of Mix magazine because it looked like an English gentleman's club inside.
Wow.
And so we had these 2 Mackie boards that were, married to each other. And we did the whole song on those Mackie boards. We weren't even thinking about it because it wasn't like, let's be the first, whatever. We found out about that much later. And we were actually honored by the Library of Congress in the National Registry of Recorded Works.
Wow.
They choose 25 songs a year. We got honored along with Moon River.
Jeez.
Yeah, right? So I can safely say we were like the Alexander Graham Bell. I think I said moment or something like that. The lyrics of it have been toured in 4 different expositions, including the Songwriters Hall of Fame traveling mobile library. And, it was at the Grammy Museum and in New York.
Amazing.
Also.
Think about how many songs you've written that have changed people's lives. Not only the artist, but the audience. And to wrap things up, there's a chapter towards the end of your book, which came out in 2023, about a concert that you recorded at the Parthenon in Greece. That album, even though you write about it so beautifully in the 2023 memoir, the album of that concert just was released 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and it has... incredibly, it has 3 songs of mine performed by Bonnie Tyler, who I miss
late great.
Very much.
Yeah.
We made a documentary that's also going to be released of the concert. It was a benefit concert for the Acropolis Museum. In an effort, the mission is to bring back the Parthenon sculptures that have been kind of on vacation at the British Museum in London. And well, I mean, the sculptures themselves are 2,000 years old, so they've been gone 200 years. That's nothing. The thing is that what people need to understand is that they're not individual works of art. Together, they create one work of art, and it's also a sacred temple.
Right.
And so that's why they need to come back to Athens. And imagine somebody come in and taking one of those pieces and saying, well, we want it for our museum. And it's like, no, you don't. That place is like a power center. This is like the identity of England is in Stonehenge. I mean, that's the way the Greeks feel about the Parthenon.
Right.
Talk to anyone in Greece, and as soon as you bring up the subject, they start crying.
Right. And this concert was a fundraiser, as you said, to support the reunification of the Parthenon sculptures to Greece from their current 200-year vacation in the British Museum in London. The album is called Desmond Child Rocks the Parthenon, the live concert album, and it is out now. This has been an absolute pleasure. We're friends, but to be able to get to talk to you and really deep dive on your life and a chance to reread your brilliant Livin On A Prayer, Big Songs, Big Life memoir with the great David Ritz, it's just fascinating to me because not only are you one of the greatest to ever do it in terms of songwriting, but I've just always loved you as a guy. You know, you're just a great guy filled with life and filled with a joie de vivre that's very hard to just make up. And when you read the book, you kind of figure out where it came from. It wasn't easy for you.
No, and I think that, my mother was from Cuba and my biological father was from Hungary. Both countries, they were Soviet dominated. And growing up, even though poor, in Miami, we were free.
That's it. And it's all about freedom. And, the freedom shines through on these songs. So again, Des, great to talk to you. And thank you for being our guest on our milestone 100th episode of Rock and Roll High School. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
and look
Pete.
forward to seeing you in the fall at either the Latin Songwriters Hall of Fame or at our next Songwriters Hall of Fame meeting.
Okay.
Have a
Thank
good
you
one.
for
Thanks,
inviting
Des.
me. Thank you.
Our love is a bed of nails. Love looks good on a bed of nails. I'll lay you down, and when all else fails, I'll drive you like a hammer on a bed of nails.
That was the legendary Desmond Child. Very few songwriters have shaped popular music as profoundly or as consistently as Desmond. His songs have become defining recordings for artists as diverse as Kiss, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, Cher, Michael Bolton, Ricky Martin, Joan Jett, Katy Perry, and countless others, proving that a truly great song can transcend genres, generations, and changing musical trends. And as you've heard today, his influence extends far beyond the songs themselves. Desmond has spent a lifetime inspiring artists, developing talent, and reminding all of us that great songwriting begins with honesty, emotion, and fearless collaboration. Be sure to check out his new release, Desmond Child Rocks the Parthenon, the live concert album, recorded live beneath the Acropolis and available now. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Rock and Roll High School wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating or review, and share the show with someone who loves great music and the stories behind it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for another episode of Rock and Roll High School.
Rock and Roll High School is a presentation of Pure Tone Music, produced by Pete Ganbarg with assistance from Steve Leeds, Joe Pomerico, Dana Stenson, Aaron Manuza, Christina Katsamanides, and Rich Mahan. Please visit our website at rockschoolpodcast.com for past episodes and information on what's coming next. All rights reserved.